focus today. First time I've done this on discussions. So discussions are the place in Canvas where you can have conversations with your students. We'll talk in this webinar today about the discussions tool itself, and then we'll also focus on using the chat tool in Canvas. We will consider the options that you have in terms of using discussions versus videos. I think a lot of you right now have been participating in my video and Zoom webinars, and we've had conversations there about how to make a class interactive or conversational using video. And the interesting thing is, even though we're talking about a text-based tool in both discussions and chat is a very simple real-time text scrolling window that you can use with your class, maybe for text office hours, and we'll talk about that too. But curiously enough, within the text-based discussions of Canvas, as you know, you're able to use a couple of features, Canvas Studio and also the Record Upload Media tool that you probably saw the last few workshops. And that would allow you theoretically then to actually have video-based discussions within what's typically a text-based realm in discussion. So we can talk about that and maybe at the end navigate a little bit, have a conversation about what you're planning to do, because I think if you're trying to use everything as I've suggested in these workshops, it might be a little bit too much for you, it might be too much for your students. Someone from LTCC today posted an article on social media about whether students should actually maybe not be enrolling in classes this term because of all the chaos. My concern about that is, don't assume that this is the only term that our college or other colleges will be closed. I've actually been sort of mentally preparing that this could go on for a year or 18 months if you look at the epidemiological reports. We don't know, but it's just something you might want to think about mentally, and maybe we can communicate to our students. So I think, I would not tell students whether or not to take classes this quarter. I hope they continue to engage, because you get that stir-crazy kind of situation going where you, just start to lose touch with the outside world because you're spending so much time indoors and on video chat. But there is a value to using video chat to have what we call telepresence, where we can communicate with one another and maintain some sense of social connection. I just saw today that Germany is banning any meeting of more than 2 people. So it's starting to increase, worldwide, where even initially it was 500 people, and then 100, and then maybe 10, and it's getting smaller and smaller. So I feel as if we'll be using more and more of video chat, not just for our classes, but for keeping up with our friends and FaceTiming and all that kind of stuff. So, just a little perspective there, but I think I'll end that by saying flexibility, as I've said in these workshops, is really key. We're going to be stressed. We're going to be learning new technology. Our students will be doing the same. So keeping a flexible approach to your class, I think, will be important. And we can talk about that a little bit more today. I'm doing a workshop this afternoon on the syllabus and student behavior. And this is just an update. I am switching, for those of you who notice, tomorrow I had scheduled these during the day. But on Monday, we're having some procedures so people can go back into the college and get some of their items using their last name. There's a very regimented system. So I wanted to push those all to the evening, because I feel like a lot of people will be going into the college during the day, and it's not going to be a good time. So today at 2, we'll have the syllabus and student behavior. So if you're interested in learning anything about how to manage difficult student behavior in an online class, especially if you're doing group counseling or anything in the social sciences where controversy is part and parcel of those courses, then you should maybe tune in for that. Also at 2, we'll talk about the syllabus. I'll go over some resources I have available for you from Canvas Commons, as well as from my own website on the syllabus, that will allow you to actually bring in some preset materials like statements, student policies from the college, these kinds of things, and then you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So do log on today at 2 if you want to use any of that material. I'll show you how to do that, and we can have a general conversation about what you might include in your syllabus, including maybe a statement about flexibility and what's going to happen if we have technology outages or whatever. Yesterday, a few of you were on one of my workshops and my computer crashed, so I do not assume that we will not have technological hurdles. For those of you out there still having some issues with Zoom signups to the Pro account, I'm trying to connect to campus leadership and get some technical help, because at my end, I don't control those accounts because they go to the state in Sacramento. So I'm really trying to see how we can best manage some of your issues with Zoom. At 4 o'clock today, I'm hoping Trevor will log on for this as well. We'll have a focus on, you have your Canvas shell, now what do you do? So we can actually problem solve, and we can probably do some screen sharing between all of you and just start asking some questions about what you might do from a design standpoint in your shell. Again, tomorrow the workshops are switching to the evening, so 6 p.m. the basics, 7 p.m. modules and pages. My check-in time every Tuesday recurring will be coming up as well, so Tuesday at noon. A couple more announcements, and we'll go on. I did mention yesterday I got a text from the college president, Jeff DeFranco, saying that we are able to now, through the Chancellor's Office, have access to more features in Canvas, and so a purchase has been made. This is actually good news. I think as we continue to see capacity issues or feature issues like with Proctorio, if you need to do proctoring, physical proctoring, I don't know how this will work, and I think it's actually not physical. I think what it does, it's a system that uses a webcam, and so a student will take a test and or some kind of assignment, and it will lock down the computer to just whatever window you're working with in your class. It also has a way using artificial intelligence, like if you're typing and you're doing a lot of this, looking at a cheat sheet or something, I think Proctorio can actually determine that. So I don't think it's going to be a physical proctoring, but it somehow determines via your webcam that as a student you're not cheating, which is kind of interesting and also Orwellian a little bit in terms of surveillance, but these are the times we live in right now. So these are additional services. I won't say too much more, but the basic message from this is that we're rolling out more because of the Chancellor's Office, and they've purchased more of this technology. Again, if you want to participate in more of the workshops, I'm offering all of these at different times and days, so watch your email. I'm also putting these on video. I have 4 of them downloaded and ready to share with people. So if you missed the live workshop, and the live workshop is a little better because you can ask some questions and it's in real time. But if you missed those and you want to watch them on your own schedule, then I'll share those with you coming up. So today's the focus on discussions. And as it says here, it's kind of straightforward, but we'll mention anyway. Discussions provides an integrated system for allowing instructors and students to contribute on discussion topics, as many as we want as instructors. They really do allow for interactive communication between 2 or more people. You can participate in conversation with an entire group of class. I'll talk about later the idea of threading discussions. A lot of our email systems that we use, Facebook actually does threaded discussions. It basically will take the same topic that you're focused on, and it will, any of the replies to that topic will string together. And so if you have topic A talking about something and topic B talking about something else, there's a really nice way then within Canvas and discussions to keep those 2 separate. It's a little challenging. Canvas isn't fully functional in terms of a threading system. It's one of those functions that I think they'll add, but I'll show you the approach that I use and then how I stress to my students a system of trying to keep the same topics together in a class. Discussions can be created as an assignment for grading purposes. It's very easy. We'll look at that under modules. When you incorporate discussions and you click the grading box or the graded box, it then automatically gets populated into your gradebook. Now, you don't have to have discussions for grades. I've seen many instructors use discussions very effectively as a general Q&A. They'll have a module, and the module will say, discussion board for all course questions, or it could be discussion board for all issues coming up. If I'm looking at Solange and what she's teaching next quarter, if you're doing anything with technology and film production, audio production, and you have maybe types of software or bits of software you're working with, maybe as you do each of those components, maybe your first part of the class is focused on, in video editing, what a timeline is. And so maybe just for that chunk of topic, you create a module that's a discussion. It doesn't have to be graded. And any student could log on and say, hey, I'm really stuck on doing this technique. Can you help me out? You could use it in a yoga class. Even though you might be teaching yoga and you might have real-time video with Zoom, you could have a discussion board and say, okay, when we worked on downward facing dog the other day, what were some of your challenges? Because certainly even though we have real-time video, it doesn't mean that if you have a class of 30, and I've said in a lot of these Zoom workshops, and by the way, if you want to ask a question, we'll have some Q&A, you can unmute later. We also have a chat room available. But I've said in many of these workshops that I struggle to keep track of everything going on. If you're hosting a Zoom workshop, You're looking at a PowerPoint. You're looking at maybe some web pages. You're looking at your control panel, which as a host is a little more involved than as a participant. You're looking at the video screen to see if everyone's muted or unmuted. You're looking at the chat room. You might be doing other things, creating a poll. That all happening at the same time, it makes it for a real challenging situation if you're teaching a synchronous class, a real-time class. So your discussion question board could actually be your friend in allowing people to ask some questions after the fact. Again, the chat room within Zoom, if you're doing a synchronous class, may make more sense because that way you can in real time get some questions. And even if you don't answer all those in real time, after you complete your Zoom workshop, your webinar, you will get a text file of a transcript of everything that was asked in the chat room on Zoom. It's really up to you, but a discussion board does not have to be graded. A discussion board could also be used for general Q&A in the class, arranged by particular topics, or you could have one discussion board for the entire class for general questions that come up. Discussion topics, as I said, can be focused, can be organized as focus or threaded discussions. Focused discussions only allow for 2 levels of nesting. We'll talk about that. Threaded discussions allow for infinite levels of nesting. There's one little setting things you click. It says threaded or unthreaded. So you click threaded and it happens. And we'll talk about what that looks like. We'll actually go through all the pages to give you a sense of this. This is just more from Canvas, and I'll show you some of Canvas's really good tutorials if you need more than what we're covering today. With discussions, you can create topics, you can thread topics. You can arrange the due dates, as you might imagine. You could do group discussions. You can easily grade your discussions with SpeedGrader. We'll look at that. You can do a podcast feed. You can pin discussions. One thing you'll notice with discussions is that it's a little more robust of a tool in Canvas than some of the other features that we've been covering. So you really do have some options there. There's a small settings tab within discussions itself I'll show you. And within that small settings tab, you can control a lot of what students can or can't do. Do you want students to edit or delete their own discussions? I actually think you should always allow that. If a student posted something offensive, I've seen this happen before. I remember there was a fight between some students on a discussion board 10, 15 years ago. I've been teaching online since 2004, so a lot of years of doing this. And I remember someone in the middle of the night was really tired, and they replied to someone, they took something personally. And by the time I logged on the next morning, I saw this string of discussions. And it turned into what used to be called a flame war. People were arguing and there was some harsh language. So I intervened, but because it was asynchronous, because I allowed students, I didn't do like approvals or anything like that. I told students, okay, reply as you like, try to be friendly and not aggressive. And unfortunately, these students got a little out of control. So I intervened the next morning, but it was one of those things that I thought, having that option to delete a discussion post is nice because hopefully students will realize if they write something offensive, they could delete it, rephrase it, even after they've posted that on the discussion board. You can also close discussion threads to comments. I'll show you how to do that. There's a few ways to do that, either with a date setting or on the board, there's a way to pin discussions, I think 2 or 3 different levels on the discussion board. Now, I guess I would say right now, we do have an option. This is another one of those forks in the road I would mention. We have some options in terms of whether we want to do discussions or video. So just to jump to my Canvas shell here, I'm actually in Commons. Let me get to my non-live class and we'll look at this. I may show you later a live class with discussions, and if I share any of that as a video, I'll just blur out student names for confidentiality purposes. But for now, I'll just show you where to find discussions. So under your settings, as you know by now, anything that is up here in this top menu is going to be visible in your class menu, the blue tabs. Anything you're not using, you put below. So obviously, if you don't use discussions at all, you wouldn't want them showing up here because it would confuse the student. Anything you're not using, you would drag down here. Always hit save, and then once you do that, it populates your course menu. I actually today I haven't used chat. When we taught in a system called Etudes ages ago, we were much more limited in the kinds of, we didn't have video, the conversations were really limited. It was not as advanced a system as Canvas. Back in the day, I would actually use live chat, as a way of connecting with students because we didn't have video. Because we have video, because we can do synchronous, asynchronous video, you have a series of tools or options that you can use as an instructor. I haven't used chat, but today I did drag it up here because I wanted to show you what chat looks like. And let me just show you like 3 or 4 different options, and then we can dive into the features. So to start with chat, it is really simple to use. I don't even think there's a setting. I think if there's a new message, this will just say it will notify me. I haven't used chat recently. I'm not sure where the notification comes, but it will show you who's online, and then it's very simple. I go to the bottom of the bar here and I say, hello class, how are you doing? And I think I could hit send or let's see, send or return key. You do that, and then the idea is anyone who's logged on could also type a message, and it's all text based. And so this is not really, it's not super interactive, right? This is a low-tech technology. It actually reminds me of going back to the days of AOL, and when you'd get those little floppy disks in the mail and stuff. You know, you get like one of those a week, and a lot of the chat and technology those days, because everything was on a dial-up modem, you know, everything was like this, very simple. Some of the early video games were text-based, and they were actually kind of fun. They were kind of interactive because even though you weren't seeing pictures, there was this whole imagination going on, and you were operating with, you know, a decision that was made, and then the computer would figure out the next thing, but it would all be presented as a text, almost as a hypertext. So this is not super interactive. What I would recommend to you is if you're using it, it could be used for quick questions. So someone might say, hey, I really don't understand what's going on. And you'd say, well, just log into the class and let's join each other in the chat room or something like that. I don't think it's that great. I just think it's really for very functional kind of conversations. You're not going to get the kind of interactivity we're getting here on Zoom. So quite obviously, as we've talked about in those video workshops, if you want to do something that's interactive, if you want to do something that will involve, you know, seeing faces and hearing people speak and all this kind of stuff, then I think you have some much better options within either Zoom, as we're all logged into now. You could incorporate that through Confer Zoom, as you know from my workshop last couple days, in Canvas. If you want to do video itself as asynchronous in a lot of places in Canvas, you know that's also an option. So a couple of places to do that, really 2 that I'm thinking of now. One is the record upload media. So you can immediately record a message to your students, and we'll do it real short here. Hit finish. We title it something. We hit save on that, and then it gets saved in whatever content I'm working with in Canvas. Again, if you're using within a page, within a module, you could save it there. You could also do it, of course, within your syllabus, because for all practical purposes, a syllabus is a content page just like this content page with the same editor, the difference being that it has a higher level of importance because students see all your policies and so forth. So I have to hit a title there, and I hit save and publish, and typically Canvas takes a few minutes. I guess it'll play it. So it's being converted, but that's a video message. So if I wanted to on my own, I could create my own instructor video messages. Those are not real-time messages, so certainly they're not going to be the same as Zoom, or you could argue won't be the same as even the chat room, which is real-time text messaging, albeit it's not interactive in this sense because we only have, you know, the mode of text being shown on the screen. The other way, as we've talked about, to do this, I could go back to the same page and I'll delete my content. I could go to Canvas Studio. It'll actually take me away from my course shell. This is on your global navigation menu, and it'll ask me to leave the site. I go to the actual media section of Canvas Studio, and we worked on this last night, and in real time I figured out how this gets incorporated. So what you do is you could record your media in Canvas right here in Canvas Studio, and I have to click it again here. I could either choose a screen capture or webcam capture, and then it may ask me on a Mac to open this little mini program at the bottom here that is just launching this application. It's similar to like that Flash player we used to see on the web pages in the past. At this point then I can choose, as you know, the screen or the webcam. Webcam is what you're seeing, my face right now. The screen capture is what you're seeing here on the screen as I'm moving my mouse around and interacting with my desktop. I could choose both, it'll do both. I simply hit record there. Once I do that, and I can adjust this window, of course. Once I do that, it will save it. I'm going to hit cancel. It'll save it under the Canvas Studio on global navigation. At any time, I could add other media from YouTube or my own video file, which I would not add YouTube media because it's stored on YouTube and that saves you some space. I could also search my media. It's very important when I go back to my class then, if I want to add my media, there's a little tool with a V, a blue V that you use to do this. So when I go back to my pages, my content there, I can click on, let's see if I find that page I just added. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Go back to pages, doesn't really matter. I can just make a new one here. And I'll just create a test page. And then what I do is, I go to that little blue V, and that's more external tools. That's in addition to the media you see here. And then this will bring up all these features. I would want to pick Canvas Studio. The minute I pick Canvas Studio, a browser comes up. I click this, and then I hit embed, and I could choose contents or not, and I embed it, and then it gets populated into the and I'll just cancel this, but it gets saved then into your page. Now, everything I'm showing you right there, of course, is asynchronous. Okay, so it's not necessarily going to be interactive, but there is a potential to do this in a few places, including within discussions. You can't do this in the text chat. In any discussion board, if I wanted to, even though it's text-based, anytime I do a reply on a discussion, and I'll show you the whole setup of the discussion window in a second here, but anytime I hit a reply, of course, I could type any text, right, and hit post reply. That will then appear here. It will also show the name who's doing the reply. But the curious thing is, if I wanted to bring in video here, I could bring in asynchronous discussions. So these will not happen in real time, but they'll be video discussions. So in other words, I could go into here. I could use Canvas Studio for your students. I would not recommend if they're using it. I don't know if they have access on their end. I cannot answer that. But they do have access to this. So they could record a video as we're doing, start that recording, and then hit finish, and then that should get saved in the discussion section here that we're operating with. Okay, post reply. And it's there. So this is an option. In other words, you could tell your students, I actually offered this option a couple years ago and no one took advantage. I said, because we're living in the age of a lot of media, multiple media that we're using on Twitter and YouTube, and now there's TikTok and all these apps and everything, social media, it might be okay for some of you to experiment with recording a video for a discussion post. So you could do that. You could record the video for your discussion post. And then the only disadvantage to you maybe is if you're getting around to grading it, instead of grading the text that someone has typed on the screen, you have to listen to that video. If a student leaves a really long message, and you could always confine that and say, please, keep your discussion posts that are videos to 2 or 3 minutes if you want to per topic. That way you're not listening to hour-long videos, because it is a lot longer potentially depending on the size of the video to sit and listen to an hour video versus actually reading discussions on a page. That's up to you. What I'm trying to suggest in this section here is, do you want to use text-based? Do you want to use the text tools of discussion but incorporate that option for having audio, video embedded in? Or do you want to just keep these as pure text? Do you want to use the chat room for the more text-based real-time discussion? Or do you want to forgo everything involving text-based discussions altogether, just use synchronous Zoom discussions? Maybe if you meet 4 hours a week, you only have 2 hours of video discussions, and the rest of your work is assignments and working through projects here on some of the other tools in Canvas. It really is up to you, but I'm recommending that you decide maybe now what you plan to do, because to try to do things on the fly, to add new tools or new functions within your Canvas shell after your class has started can be challenging, just because the students get used to how you've set that class up. But let me right now, I've talked for quite a bit, so let me just open up to questions. If you want to ask a question, you could hold the space bar down or you could go to your profile right now and just unmute yourself. And just a conversation, I will show you what the discussion board looks like as far as mechanics, but any conversations about maybe whether you're thinking about using a text-based discussion in the class, or if you're thinking about doing videos like Zoom real-time live videos. So any thoughts on that or questions on that? Solange?
So far, I think that I'm going to keep my class live. If I use discussions, it'll be in between classes.
Yeah. Thinking about, and you've been participating in quite a few workshops, thinking about your class, I was almost thinking, you could set up all your Zoom discussions, and then you could create a module that could be, questions. We could call it questions about the class. I've seen people do this. You could add that module. Added modules are always at the bottom. I could make it live, and then I could add to that then a brand new discussion. And again, anything you create in your module section, assignment, pages, quizzes, exams, discussions, will populate the corresponding feature that you typically see on the course navigation tabs. So if I create a new discussion right here, let's see here. I'm just going to hit new topic, and I'll call it questions because I want it to be a brand new topic. I'm going to add that item. And if I publish that, and we haven't looked at this yet, but when I click on questions, then you'll just see something like this, and I'll want to probably set some features up about this. But then students could ask any question of the class, and of you as an instructor, and then when they come back to this, or you come back to it, you can then answer those questions. So that might be a good option. And again, you could have this as ungraded because a question typically wouldn't be graded. Now, if you had something where you wanted students to ask each other questions about a work, an assignment, or reading, something like that, then that could be graded. But a Q&A board is something like, I'm really stuck in the class, I don't understand something, can you give me further instruction? And then at that point, you could also decide how to deal with that issue. You could have a side conversation with the student. You could do a one-on-one Zoom, an office hour, a chat, a Canvas inbox. There's a lot of different ways to communicate in Canvas. I would say you shouldn't try to use every single mode of communication because it's going to overwhelm you and also your students. So it seems like a smart option there. I mean, describing what you're doing, if you're working on something like an artistic portfolio, if you're working on a piece of software, if you're teaching yoga, yoga would be one where I would be really challenged to see how you do that asynchronous, because if you take a yoga class, the whole point in real time is that the instructor is trying to fix people's positions. It's very nuanced how you do the various poses in yoga. So some disciplines may lend themselves just to doing the synchronous video and others may not. In social science, I would say you have more options. Social science, sure, there's a value to having real-time conversations, but you can also have offline conversations and they can be equally effective. So decide for yourself, decide what makes the most sense, and don't do something that is going to challenge you or your students, particularly as we're dealing with all these adjustments to our lives or living in conditions that most of us probably have not experienced in the past. So let me jump then to what a discussion board looks like in case you decide to use this. And there are a slew of options actually within discussions at the level of settings, and then also when we click on a particular discussion that we can control, we can adapt to as we see fit for our classes. So this is my particular structure in the classes I've been teaching, and it's only my structure. And this structure is replicated here, week 1 discussion, week 2 introductions, because when you go to my modules, you'll actually see that I have a weekly structure. I have a getting started section, a little bit about the instructor, all my policies. This is what I'm going to cover today at 2 o'clock. All these policies I'll go through with you and share some snippets that you can cut and paste into your class. I mentioned something about what the work in the class is like for the discussions. Here's what you should expect in the class. You have to do, 150 word discussions. I actually created a chart, and I may talk about this later, because students often get confused on how to thread their discussions in Canvas. And I created this chart because I discovered that students were constantly doing it the wrong way, and it created 4 pretty messy discussion boards. So the reason I have my discussion set up by weekly topics or discussion boards is That's the structure of my class. I do everything by week 1, week 2, week 3. You don't have to do that. As I've said in other workshops, choose a structure that makes sense for you and stick to that structure. In some cases, though, there's symmetry between the structure, the architecture, if you will, say in your modules and what happens in other sections of the class. So for me, when I click on my discussions, because I'm doing things by weeks, it makes the most sense to have weekly discussions. So for that week, and I'll show you actually the live class, but for that week, they will have topics that go along with the readings. And then I've strategically written questions ahead of time that I populate into the discussions tab. Unfortunately, there's no way to, if you bring in a class, like if you teach this class you're doing in spring and do it in summer or fall, you can populate that into your next class in the next term. It will not save the discussion topics. Currently, there isn't a functionality for that. So I recommend saving offline, and I'll talk about what these topics are because you can't see them yet. But for the class I'm teaching right now, I have a folder in my hard drive on my computer. I have all these various preset things that I typically like to use in a class that maybe isn't saved in Canvas if I carry that class over from one term to the next. So discussion topics are an example. So I've written some preset questions that go along with the readings that I've designed for each week. I do that for the whole quarter. Now the challenge of that is if I use media that is a video, and that video no longer exists on YouTube and it's dead, then I have to make sure that I'm not using old material. I'm constantly updating this even though I do have some preset information, my exam questions, other things of that nature. So it might be a handy approach for you to have in a Word document all your discussion topics that you plan to incorporate for a given week. Save those on your hard drive, and then when you come back and teach your class a second time and you do that copy previous class from spring term to summer or spring to fall, you can bring in those preset discussion topics. Let me just go back to discussions though here at the main page and show you what to expect. So you'll see a series of types of discussions. If you click on these, it will minimize or maximize the menu. So you have what are called pin discussions. And the way I use pin discussions, and others can jump on as well, is if it's the current week. So if we're in week 11, these are all drop and drag. And I drop and drag, and you do not have to save at the bottom. Unlike the updating of the course menu, there's no save at the bottom or at the top. You just drop and drag, and then that information is given the designation of pinned. I like to see those as those are the important discussions that students need to focus on for the week. But the truth is, if students work ahead, depending on your discussion settings, I've seen students still navigate to the next week, click on it, even though it wasn't pinned. I could also do this. If I drag a discussion here, as you can see, you currently have no discussions with closed comments. To close comments on a discussion, drag it here, select close for comments from the discussion settings menu. Okay. And then it says open for comments. So I guess the setting is then, it looks like if it's here, and this class isn't live, but it says locked, but that could also be because of my, my date setting. One of the confusing things, if you will, about Canvas discussions is you could close discussions from these menus using this. You could also close discussions just by the date setting, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So there's a lot of different ways to work with your discussions. There are some setting menus up here. We'll talk about commons discussions and importing those in a second. That would be for that feature. This is for your student features. So you could go in and decide that you don't want students to create their own discussion topics. So if you want total control over your class, if you want to be the only person who sets up a topic because those are the key areas that you want students to discuss, then this should be blank. Anytime it's highlighted or X'd or checked rather in gray there, then that means it is active. So if I don't want students to create their own topics, leave that unchecked. Do I want them to edit and delete their own posts? I don't see why you would ever uncheck that, because to me, we're trying to treat students as adults, and we hopefully front load some of our policies and say, hey, you cannot post offensive things, you can't use hate speech, you can't make fun of someone, you can't be aggressive. And I'll talk about this at 2 o'clock hour, but I've had students in a class before where they've actually been really aggressive. They started insulting me. They insulted the discipline of sociology. So it can happen. So 2 o'clock, that'll be our specific focus. But I still take the approach that all of our students are adults, and they should have the right, I feel, to edit and delete their own posts. This is kind of a curious one. Attach files to discussions. I leave these all as default because those are the default in Canvas if you don't do anything to these settings. But I don't have an issue with that. I mean, what file would they attach to a discussion? An MP3? I don't really know. The truth is, students can, within the rich content editor, in their discussion posts, upload an image, and that is done right within Canvas. So this wouldn't affect that ability. This would just be if you didn't want students to upload a PDF to a discussion post. I don't see a reason to uncheck that, but you might have one, so just consider that. Once you've done that, hit Save Settings, and then it will just remember those settings for the future. Now, aboard or up at the top here, you can look at anything that's unread, and then you can highlight that. I never do read or unread. My approach to discussions is text discussions like these that we're talking about, is I try to log into the class a couple times a day. All of our work schedules are different. You decide how you want to do that. And then I'll click on the current week of discussion that it is. I try to see what students have posted, and then I do some replies, because one of the things we want to emphasize with the text discussions, just like these video ones we're doing now, is if you're on there, I've seen classes in the past, I've evaluated classes in the past, where, I kid you not, the entire week is students having conversations with one another, but then there isn't an intervention of the instructor coming in and giving their synthesis or giving their perspectives and helping students out. So if you're doing discussions, it should not ever just be discussions only of students, because you're the instructor, you're the expert in the content. You need to come in and give your content expertise, and you need to manage controversy. Not all of your classes, if you're Helen teaching math, students maybe won't get into a big fight about how to solve the quadratic equation. But if you're in social science, or you're doing group counseling, or you're doing something that has controversy connected to it because it's a disturbing topic, you need to be in there, navigating, helping students out. If they get out of line, bring them back into the fold and so forth. But what I would say is I don't get too hung up on unread and read. I rarely will search by, I'll show you how this happens in a live class. If I'm trying to see if a student is participating, there's a way to do that on Gradebook, but I could search by a particular author. So if I type my name, and maybe just I haven't hit reply yet, but it would also show me then by title and author. Anytime I want to add a new discussion, you could do that within modules, as I showed you. You could add it here. This rich content, exactly the same as you've seen in every area of Canvas. I wouldn't mess with the all sections. Typically you're teaching one class that's also its own section. I think there are very rare cases where that's not the case. This is where you get into some bit of setup that I think you do need to address. So I haven't done group discussions. If you want to do group discussions, if you're doing projects, you could do this. You could set the name of this. You could call it whatever you want. You could automatically split students into 4 groups, and it'll populate based on how many are in your class. There's some settings here. You could assign a group leader. I'm not going to do a lot of conversation about this now. I will tell you that I have some other resources. Connect with me offline, because I have a video I've done just on the groups setting within discussions. I don't use it, but if you want to break students into small groups, you could certainly do that using that feature. This is very important. This is your available from and until. If it's a Q&A discussion board for the class, I wouldn't even touch this, because presumably you want that to run from week 1 through week 11 of the class. The way I set up my structure, because I'm doing it by week 1, week 2, week 3 discussions, whatever my week definition is, if my week starts on a Sunday and ends on a Sunday or whatever, we all have different due dates. I typically, I have things due, like the class I'm doing now, on Saturdays. And so Sunday is the start of week 2, Saturday is the end of week 1. Okay? So in that setting, what I try to do then is, for all my discussions, go on and set my available from. Now, if I want students to work ahead, or if I want students to possibly, wait, then I start to confine things. I could, have it as a prereq under modules, and I've talked about that in my modules workshop. You have a lot of control over whether or not you want discussions to be open for a long period of time or confine that only to a short period of time. If it's ungraded, I would say to you, if this is not checked, it's probably not a big deal. Maybe you don't have to deal with the start and stop time. If it's a graded assignment, then you have to think about all of a sudden the due date pops in. The reason the due date doesn't show up if it's ungraded is because it doesn't matter, right? You can still confine the availability, but the way we teach classes typically is assignments are due on a particular day. And based on that, if it's graded, automatically you get the feature option here of a due date. So once you set that due date, then you, and I'm not going to go over this again, but I've talked about this in modules and pages and assignments. If you set a due date to be today, the 22nd, and you have it available and after that date, that allows for late work to trickle in. And you could go in and assign that late work a penalty or something like that. The way I teach my classes, I have my until date and my due date for everything, discussions, assignments, the same date. So if it's due on March 21st, it's until March 21st. I don't allow for late work. If you allow for late work, then you might give accommodation on the tail end here, allowing this to, happen 2 days after something is due. So once I click the grading, the other thing you will note is all these other options open up. These are very similar to the options under assignments. So you can display things as a percentage, as a grade. You can assign. I would put this under my discussions assignment group. Again, very easy. Anytime assignment group is populated in any menu, any place in Canvas, all you have to do is click new group, just like new page, and then you can create that, that new group. And then based on that, that will then be an option on the menu. So that's pretty easy. The liking thing is just if students want to like topics. I guess it's a Facebook thing. They're trying to port over. I don't know. I've put that on just for fun. It's like an emphasis thing, like an emoji. If students like what someone posted, they could give them a thumbs up. It doesn't affect, in my mind, grading or anything like that. Podcast feed tries to replicate how you might get podcasts in terms of the threading of the topics. This one I've never checked. Users must post before seeing replies. I just don't like that. Some people like that, but I'm also a person in my module structure. I don't do prereqs. I don't say complete module 1 before you start module 2. That's 2. That's just my approach as a teacher. But if you want that, if you want students to have to post something before they can do a reply, then check that. Now, threaded replies, I'll talk about this. If you click that, what will then happen is anytime someone posts something, it will go into that threaded structure. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. But this is your main discussion menu. So there is a lot to set up here. The minute you hit save and publish, that discussion goes live. And I would recommend to you, as you can see on my discussions, to really set up something at the top of your discussion page that describes to your student what the assignment is. So it says here, please submit 2 discussions. Each should be 150 words minimum. Check your word count. One should discuss an aspect of the reading or the media for the week. Because I want students not to just have a free-for-all. It's not social media, and this is really key. We'll talk about this in the 2 o'clock hour today. Discussions can be really tricky in classes with sensitive topics, and they can be really tricky because we're used to communicating, particularly in the age of Donald Trump, right? Twitter, social media has become a place for vitriol, for very aggressive and I would say inappropriate communication. Because of that, if students are really used to communicating, not capitalizing, things when they type on Facebook, whatever, if they then participate in your text-based discussions, you may want to front load policies in your class, or here at the top, you could write a whole thing saying, you must write your discussions using correct grammar and spelling. You cannot use abbreviations. You have to write the word YOU out for you. You can't use the letter U. Because I just warn you a little bit, because of social media, students sometimes then appear in our classes and think, well, it's going to be just like on Facebook or Twitter or TikTok. I guess TikTok is video based, but regardless, you may want to really define how the communication will appear on your discussion board. If you don't do that up front and things get out of control, it's a lot harder to intervene at that moment and to say, hey, by the way, you guys are being too aggressive, or you're not doing a good job in terms of checking your word counts or whatever. I've spent a lot of my time as an instructor since 2004 in these online classes going back and telling students, fix it kind of thing. So, yeah. Any questions about that before? I want to show you what an actual threaded discussion looks like, but any thoughts or concerns about maybe how you might use text-based discussions and how those could get out of control if you didn't define things for your students up front?
Back on the main page, if you go to your list of discussions.
Yep.
Okay, what are the blue dots?
Blue dots, good question. Let's see. I think, what are the blue dots? It could be, let's see. Is it pinned? No, pin is there. Are they closed? Are they, let's see. I'm trying to, yeah, I know this is like flagging a discussion. Let me just see real quick. Blue dots, Canvas, discussion boards. Oops, misspelled it, but here we go. To left announcement is a not read indicator, meaning you have not clicked on the announcement. Well, it's saying announcement, but I bet it's the same, meaning you haven't read it. Let's try that. Let's go back to my shell and let me just go in there week 4 and let's see if that affects it when we go back to the menu. Okay, so I won't reply. Let me go back to discussions, and yeah, that was it. Okay, so it means unread. So, and I think right there you see the way I use discussions, and there's actually one, if any of you figure out the eyeball, I've been searching and searching, there's an eyeball here, and I'm not sure what that is. And I've actually Googled, I'm like, what is the eyeball in discussion? And this just appeared recently because the old tutorials don't even have this icon here. And I'm thinking it might be like, maybe it's sorting it. No, I think that's unread. So anyway, what I want to emphasize in these workshops is that as you start to use Canvas, there are things that even after years of using it, you get into your own routine and you sometimes don't use all the functions available. Canvas is as robust an LMS, a learning management system, as you'll find, which is a good thing. We want more functions than we are going to actually use. So thanks. I learned what the blue dots are now. So let me show you threaded discussions. I think this could be kind of interesting for you. I'll go to a live class. This is my current class, which I need to finish up. I've been doing these workshops, and I'm a little bit, it's one of the things you find with online teaching. As an instructor, sometimes it's easier to put things off maybe than you would a face-to-face class because you're actually going into the class at a particular time. So I do need to get caught up myself. I'm going to show you these, and if I use this in post, I will blur out names just with a filter. So let me show you like week 10. This is my Soc and Ethnic Relations, my Sociology of Race and Ethnic Relations, Soc 107. So I have this class set up as using threaded discussion. So again, the way to do that is under settings when I create it, or if I want to update anything, there's a danger here. Because students have already started or submitted, I haven't mentioned this in past training, same thing in quizzes. You really shouldn't, and I think in the case of quizzes, maybe you're unable to, you shouldn't change things on the fly once discussions have started, with the exception of, you could post something up here as a reminder, but you wouldn't want to all of a sudden change it from graded to ungraded because then that's going to throw the entire class off. When I went in here though and created it, I clicked the blue check, I allowed threaded replies. So what that means is when students reply to a topic that they've set up, and there's our blue, is that our blue dot? Oh, look at that. So in this case, interesting. So it looks like in this case, let me navigate away. It's allowing me just to maybe highlight that I've read those or I've checked them off because the blue dots remain. So, okay. Anyway, so you can use that if you want. what happens in my discussion boards is I take that discussion sheet that I showed you from my hard drive. So I have a list of preset topics saved. I will then go in, and this is fairly clunky. So I open my Word doc. I have to cut and paste not the entire list, but I have to do each of these separately. Canvas currently doesn't have, they allow for what they call threaded discussions, but they don't allow us to save these, to port them over from one quarter to the next as we import our class. What that means is every time I create this class, I can bring in, say, my 11 weeks of discussions. Those will come in, but they'll be blank. So I have to go to Microsoft Word. I have to cut and paste each of those discussion topics. If you're doing threaded discussions, you always will start at the top for a new topic, and then you type that in. This is a live class, so I won't do it. It will then always put the new content at the bottom of the page. And then what happens is, because it's threaded, this is very key to tell students. Tell them, if you want to create a new topic that is not included on my preset topics, and this is one of my preset topics, read over the reading, stereotype realism, ... file number 15. Discuss one thing you learned from the selection. What the students then do is they hit reply here. If you reply there, it threads it underneath the previous discussion post. If you hit reply at the top, it always puts it as a new topic and it creates a new thread. This is something that students really get somewhat confused over, and I'm constantly then trying to remind them. And I say, please click on this link because it shows you if you want a new topic, this is what you do. If you reply to a student topic, if you do a preset topic, it's a little confusing, and I find that early on, if I don't remind students and go in and intervene a little bit, they forget, and then like someone will reply talking about this topic thread as a new topic, and then all of a sudden you have two different threads going onto the discussion board focused on the same topic. So that, in my mind, involves a little bit of policing just to make sure that students follow the rules, kind of thing. So this is what a discussion board looks like. It can be very interactive. There can be good conversation. Students can be very personal with one another. They can ask questions. As you see, every student who does a post will then have a thought. And then what I try to do during the week, again, is I will go in and say, hey, thanks for the start on this interesting article. I appreciate the comments, etc. What will eventually happen is, at the end of the week, I could go into SpeedGrader. I won't show you that because there are student names here and grades. But I click on that, and it's very nice. It basically shows me every single student will pop up. Canvas will automatically then show me every post that the student has done in the week, which is great for my work because I'm telling students they have to do 2 150-word posts for the week. And then that way Canvas will show me their 2 posts. I can very easily go in, I could cut and paste this if I think it's less than 150 words and check the word count in Microsoft Word, or I could check it in a program or something like that. So there's a question. Let me just answer a chat question. How can we set up one-on-one time? Would you have individuals that can help me in Canvas? Okay, yeah, let's talk offline about that. Actually, at 4 o'clock today, we'll have a workshop on working through your Canvas shells. The other opportunity would be to connect with me and Treva. So let's talk offline, and I'm hoping we can set some one-on-one time going into the next 2 weeks of getting ready for classes. So yeah, in terms of discussions, again, I think they can be very interactive. I think they can be great places for students to collaborate. I think they can be excellent opportunities for you to have conversations with your students. Yeah, go ahead. Was it Betsy who was trying to talk? No?
No.
Okay, I heard a little voice. That's okay. Now, again, the one disadvantage of using a discussion board is it's asynchronous. So I type a comment, a student types a comment, another one does. So it collects the comments over time. I don't see that necessarily as a bad thing, but if you're doing an activity that requires more real-time communication, maybe think about that. Maybe think about using a different approach in terms of your not doing discussions, doing video chat or whatever. So I mentioned threaded discussions. You had a chance to look at that. What else? I just want to make sure. Let me put this in our group chat window. If you want more tutorials, because either let me make sure it goes to everyone. Either I don't use the feature, or you might just want to look on your own time. I just included this link in the group chat. So click on that and you can actually use that. The other easy way to do, anytime I have a question in Canvas, as I did with the blue dots, I will just type a search in Google. I will say Canvas discussions. And usually the very first thing that pops up is, or the second link, how do I create a discussion? And then you can navigate that tutorial page. These are tutorials direct from Canvas, and they're very good. They're some of the best tutorials you'll find for any kind of software. So take advantage of that as well offline. If you want, kind of talked about that earlier, this is kind of cool. If you want keyboard shortcuts within your discussions, all you have to do is type the comma, and then you can use these keyboard shortcuts. And let me just show you how that works. You don't have to remember those. You go into your discussion, and I will, again, just on my keyboard, hold down the comma, and all of a sudden the shortcuts come up. I just press it once and they stay. I press it again and they go away. So these shortcuts then, I just hit J to go to the next message, K, previous message. Reply to current message is kind of cool. I just hit an R at any time. I don't need any other key. Just hit the R key. I hit R, and it will, I think, let's see, reply to the current one, or maybe I have to be in that. I'm not sure if I have to be in the, it's not doing it, but let's see. Let me hit K, J. It's weird. I tried it earlier and it was working. Let's see, reply to current message. I wonder if I have to have that selected. And hit an R. Oops, no, that went to me. So, well, in any case, we're running short on time. So I just want to mention that those are keyboard shortcuts. The chat we talked about. Let's see, anything else? Let me show you one more feature in the last few minutes. So we could, if we wanted to, import discussion topics into our class from Canvas Commons. To do that, you click on Commons, as you've learned about, and you would simply, this is kind of cool, I haven't shown you this, it's a filter feature. You could always type in a keyword. So if you're teaching addiction studies, you could type in addiction studies and results will come up. I could then clear that out, go back to 92,000 results. I could filter it by just type. So if I want to see every discussion on every topic, I could filter it by discussions. I could also choose only undergraduate, and that will lower the results. So 90,000, 92,000 went to 39,000. If I click on just discussions, then you'll see even fewer, so 1,100 or 1,200 results. These are going to be discussions, though, that are based on specific topics. So what you would probably want to do is click here a keyword, like for me, if I'm teaching anthropology, let's type in anthropology, and I only get 4 results. Okay, so you click on these results. If it's not something related, if I'm not doing anything on ghosts and monsters, that's going to be kind of useless for my class. So you won't always find stuff you can use, but you do have the option in Commons to bring in any resources. If you like that resource, as you have learned, just click import and download, and then you can immediately pull that into your class. In this case, because it's a discussion marked as such with the icon, it will then be imported in your discussions already. You could go in and edit that and so forth. So in closing today, again, if you're teaching in any subject that has the potential for heated discussions, if it's anything that is sensitive topic, whatever, then do consider having policies set up. I'll talk about that in the 2 o'clock workshop today. The other advantage you have is, because if you're using Zoom, you could also use Zoom for some private chats that you don't typically have the option to do in Canvas, except if you do inbox messages among your students. So if you're doing Zoom chats, you could use the Zoom text chat in real time while you're doing the synchronous zooming of video to deal with sensitive topics. If a student says, hey, I want to talk right now on our video chat about this topic, but I'm concerned that it might not be appropriate, they could use the private chat function in Zoom, send you that message. You could say, excuse me, class, reply to that message, approve it or not. So actually, there's a lot of good stuff, I think, using Zoom chat in the chat window that could also help you out with your synchronous video zooming that you might be doing. So as usual, I guess if there are questions, we could talk offline. There's a few people dropped off, but do you have any questions that are not terribly involved that we could answer her just in a couple minutes. Take the time. Solange?
Hi, Dr. Scott.
Yeah.
The keyboard shortcut, can you do that again, please? The
Mm-hmm.
keyboard shortcut.
Yeah, so we go to discussions. The only thing you have to remember is use the comma. Let me get back to my class. I'll go back to my... it worked for me on this shell today. So I go to my discussions, and at any time, I just press once the comma, and then I guess I have to be in the discussion. I haven't used this, but let's see. Yep, so the shortcuts pop up. And it looks like...
comma?
Yep, all I press is comma. I press comma, it goes away, press comma, it comes up.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And that was one of those I discovered just this morning. I was just doing some prep to see, some things that I don't use in discussions. I've never used that before, but it's kind of handy. So it's just a way of doing that. There is a way, I think, let me see, under SpeedGrader. I think you can do that in SpeedGrader too, if I hit a comma. Yeah, same thing. So you might just try that out. So I didn't show you the SpeedGrader, but if I'm grading student discussions, it's really nice because I can go from student 1 to student 2, and just by pressing the arrows back and forward. And then, as I said, student 1 will have all their discussions that they did for your assignment, if it was a graded assignment for that week, all appearing in this window. And then if I hit the comma again, some different options come up. Next student is J. I can try that. I bet because I don't have students in here, it won't do it. It won't. But it's kind of nice to remember the comma in a lot of areas of Canvas will come up, and it allows you to automate some of the work that you're doing. You could take a screenshot of these. You could save that as a Word doc, and then you could have that available for your reference later on if you're grading something or working on a discussion. So it looks like the comma is pretty universal in some of the areas in Canvas and SpeedGrader, and also in your discussion board to pull up some options for either grading or automating some of your work with shortcuts. So it's kind of handy. If you're using a lot of software out there, if you're doing anything with video software, audio software, Pro Tools, often you can actually buy overlays for your keyboards, because sometimes those shortcuts will save you a ton of time, and you can buy actual keyboard overlays that allow you to remember those shortcuts on your keyboard just for working with software. So this can be time savers in a lot of software applications. I've never used those in Canvas, but you're welcome to try those out for sure. So yeah, cool. So I think that's it. I think most people have logged off. So let's call it quits for now. Again, if you want to come today to the future workshops, 2 o'clock students and student behavior and the syllabus, and then 4 o'clock Canvas shell, do some hands-on. I'll send out a message about the time changes for tomorrow's workshops as well, which will be more evening workshops. So that's it. Good luck. I will hopefully see some of you again in a